Hello everyone, welcome back to another tremendous video. I hope you are having a great day. But today, I thought I'd cover how copyright eventually ruined the technique of sampling in hip-hop. First, we gotta answer, what is sampling? Sampling in rap is a technique of using a part of an existing sound recording, such as a drum break, vocal line, or melody, and incorporating it into a new musical composition to create a new track. Now that we got that out the way, let's talk about the early days. By the late 1970s and 1980s, hip-hop pioneers were already building the genre on sampling. DJs and producers like Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, and Marley Marl would take the breaks from funk, soul, blues, and disco records, loop them, then spit some real shit over them. By then, groups like Public Enemy, De La Soul, and the Beastie Boys were already layering dozens of samples in one track. The main reason why that was because at the time, copyright enforcement was loose. Sampling was mostly seen as collage art, mostly pulling sounds from black music history and repurposing them for something new. This was pretty much the case for a bit until we hit a turning point: lawsuits and court decisions. The biggest ruling that really impacted copyright was the Grand Upright Music versus Warner Bros. Case. That took place in 1991. You see, what happened was Biz Markie sampled Gilbert O'Sullivan's Alone Again without any clearance. This led to a judge ruling that apparently sampling is similar to theft, which is such bullshit, by the way, if I'm just gonna keep it real. This was the case that really set the precedent that any unlicensed sample, no matter how short, was infringement. After this ruling, record labels slowly but surely required artists to clear every sample, no matter how small. From that point on, costs for production skyrocketed. Artists now had to pay large sums or give up big portions of royalties to the artists who owned the original samples. Obviously, that's going to take a big toll on the sound of hip-hop because clearing one sample could cost thousands of dollars, and sometimes you just couldn't afford that. Albums like Paul's Boutique by Beastie Boys, which had hundreds of samples, would be impossible to release under today's clearance rules. As time went on, underground and up-and-coming artists couldn't afford to sample, so this pushed many towards cheaper royalty-free sounds, drum machines, or even some live instrumentation. I feel like a hidden butterfly effect of copyright getting stricter was the increase in corporate control. You see, on some level, the ability to sample became tied to major label backing. Early on, only big companies had the money and lawyers to handle the negotiations, which leads to independent artists getting shut out or pressured to sign away their souls to shitty deals. This was kinda a big hit to hip-hop because hip-hop's golden era thrived on sample-heavy production. Once the laws really cracked down, many argue that hip-hop lost some of its diversity and experimentation. Now, it's not all bad after that because hip-hop would end up finding some loopholes and workarounds. Producers began using interpolations, which is when a producer replays or recreates a sample with studio musicians to avoid paying for the master recording. Some artists just straight out turned to making original compositions with drum machines and synthesizers to build new beats. But a large reason why these hurdles were jumped over was due to the rise of trap and digital production in the 2000s and 2010s. Producers learned to produce more on software instruments and less on sampling old records. I'm telling y'all this because it is pretty important to how hip-hop developed over the years. At the end of the day, sampling is the DNA of hip-hop because hip-hop emerged as a cultural movement rooted in recycling sounds. And to go along with that, sampling was not just a musical tool, but a form of historical preservation as well. You see, by sampling James Brown, George Clinton, or any obscure jazz, producers somewhat created a dialogue across generations of black music. Copyright restrictions essentially disconnected hip-hop from part of its cultural roots. But look, beyond that, this whole copyright shit kinda also split listeners and artists into two sides, alright? That's theft versus art. You see, the thing is, copyright law treats sampling as theft, but in practice, it's often transformative art. A 5 to 10 second slot of music being flipped into an entirely new beat doesn't diminish the original, it gives it new life. Really, the tension lies between artistic freedom and intellectual property rights. Copyright laws inherently leans towards protecting the old, while hip-hop pushes towards creating the new. Oh, and by the way, I definitely gotta shine a spotlight on the inherent economic inequality that comes with all this. Wealthier labels and artists can afford clearances, while underground or indie musicians can't. This simply just reinforces power structures in the music industry, keeping hip-hop's grassroots cultures limited unless money is involved, and that's never good for the space. Ultimately, when the law restricted sampling, it forced producers to innovate in new directions. This gave rise to subgenres like trap, drill, and experimental electronic hip-hop. But on that same note, we also lost a lot of that layered, sample-dense soundscapes that made the albums from the golden era so groundbreaking. I don't know. Me personally, I really wish copyright laws weren't so strict. Hip-hop was always meant to be inclusive. It was always meant to be a community thing. But copyright laws and the industry, on top of 100 other things, keep people from truly connecting with the culture. Sit back and imagine a world where the artists in hip-hop have absolute full creative control in their music. The music would be just so top tier and so much better than what we have now. I feel bad for the rappers too, especially ones who specialize in sampling. A lot of the rappers today have vaulted songs, and a large reason why they're vaulted is because they can't get the tracks cleared. It's really lame knowing that your favorite artist could have the biggest hit stuck in a hard drive because they can't legally release it. I'm not sure, man. I just hope one day all that bullshit goes away and we can get back to good hip hop. Let me know what you think though in the comments. Anyways, if you watched the video all the way to the end, thank you so much. Let me know if you want me to make a video on something specific. But until next time, goodbye.